Welcome to this episode of Patio Pondering, the podcast. Today we have a longtime friend of mine from northeast Iowa, Mr. AJ Friedges. AJ and I met when he and I were working together at Farmer's Elevator in Profitability, Iowa. I was helping him with some swine diets and some swine customers, and AJ continues to be a livestock sales specialist with Merrick Brothers there in Profitability. The interesting aspect about AJ and why I wanted to have him on the podcast is he's got a dual role in that he does work in town helping livestock producers through his job. He and his family have corn, soybeans, cattle, and custom raise some pigs there in northeast Iowa. One of the nuggets that I'd like to hit on for us today is how we view the direct-to-consumer market and how that affects some of us as small producers and how we can deal with the allure of the perceived profitability in that endeavor. AJ, before we get started, can you pick up kind of where I left off on your story and kind of give us a background of how you did get into having skin in the game and raising livestock and crops?
Yeah, I guess I did grow up on a small cow-calf operation up by the Twin Cities, 125 miles from where I live now. Met my wife, went to college at the University of River Falls, and met my wife. I actually moved down. We're about 6 miles from her parents. In 2012, I started farming, rented my first farm. 17, we bought a farm that we currently live on now. And we built the pig barn because I was taking care of some pigs for the people that I work for at the mill. And the place we bought had a 1,000 head barn on it, but they wanted a 2,500 head site. They were going through an expansion, so we added on and built a 1,500 head barn, so we have 2,500 pig spaces. Then we I've always loved the cattle. Like I said, I grew up with them and always wanted to do something with them. I've always been into I was always really big into the show cattle deal, and kind of decided once we bought our farm that we need to focus more on making money than show cattle, which it takes a lot of money to start generating income on. And so, I've always liked starting cattle, or like the smaller cattle aspect of it. So we started backgrounding, and it's kind of one of them segments with what working as a feed salesman, seeing the different segments. So one part of the segment that I think, because of it, there's so much risk in it, it seems like there's always some profit in it. If you can keep those animals alive and do a good job, it seems like it's the most consistent income in the cattle industry. So that's the route we went. That and we could run more head per our lot spaces versus finishing cattle out. We background about 160 head per turn twice a year. I figure if we were going to feed those out, we'd probably be at half, maybe 2/3 of that capacity if we're going to finish them just for space reasons. So that's kind of the why we went that route.
So you're going more for the volume, get more throughput, a little more potential for profit per head as opposed to hitting a home run with feeding out a fat steer.
Yeah, and keeping cash flow moving pretty quick. We've only got them for 150 days before they're leaving, and we're bringing another group in. So usually there's 2 weeks to a month in between turns, which gets you to about a full year. So two turns a year is kind of what we try to do. And it just, like I said, really helps the cash flow is the big part of doing it that way too.
Well, you bring up an interesting point that when we get caught up in the romanticism of cattle, and there's something about having cows, and you and I are on TikTok, and you'll see that video with the background music of people that have the life's better with cows around. You've got that romanticism of the cowboy or the steers, or the cow with the sun in the background or the moonscape. But last week when I talked to Todd Thurman, we were talking about some COVID effects. And we were talking about how the poultry industry was able to zig really quick because the signal said we needed to. And the poultry industry can go from set to the freezer or the display case with a broiler in 64 days. So 2 months.
Yep.
And the pigs, from the time that you inseminate a sow till that pig leaves your barn is 9-10 months? Maybe?
Yeah,
less than a year for sure.
Yep.
So when a cow, from the time that a cow was bred and her calf is turned into meat is 2.5 years? 2 years?
Yeah, you're probably, let's see, you got 16 months from the time, basically from birth to harvest, you're at 16 months on a rough end. Then you got 9 months. So yeah, you're looking at 2 years to get you.
Yeah. So you get 2 years from conception to plate.
Yep.
As this podcast gets to people that are outside of livestock production and cattle production for sure, your discussion of cash flow is a big one, particularly with somebody that's starting out that doesn't have facilities that are paid for. They don't have a legacy involved in having that cash flow. So can you talk about the importance of cash flow and how that really helped you and your wife decide of how you wanted to fit into the beef industry? It's really easy for us to sit back and talk about know your costs, know your profitability, know where you can buy those calves or where you can sell those calves so that you make a profit. But we forget about in tight times and in startup operations, the importance of cash flow because you get bills coming in continually. If you take those calves in at 5 weights or 7 weights and you take them to market at 1,350, 1,400 pounds, you've got a lot of time with no income coming and stuff going out. So how did that fit into your discussions or your thoughts?
And I guess that's why we're making our turns shorter. I guess if we were going to finish cattle out, we would probably be doing the exact opposite or going from like the stage I'm selling them to the stage I'd be buying them at that stage to finish them. Just because, like you said, bills are constantly coming in. I guess the one nice thing too is we've got a grain operation also, so we're able to sell some grain along the way, along with having the pig barn. I guess that's why I think diversification is huge. We also got the pig barn. We're custom feeding. We get a rent check every month from them. Just to help with everyday bills. And to me, that's in this game, unless you've got a very, very, very understanding banker that you're only going to get one check a year from something, you got to be able to have some cash flow. And I've got a great banker. She lets me do way more than she probably should, to tell you the truth.
That's the kind of banker we all want, right?
Yeah. The last 2 months I've bought 25 cows, just older cows. We're going to calve out. We're going to run on grass all summer long. And then come fall, we're going to wean the calves, sell the cows, and probably sell the calves as well. Just to give that a try this time.
I think you hit on a point that we like to talk about. And as we talk about first generation or starting out farmers or people like in my boat that are second shift farmers, how we view diversification. And that definition of diversification has changed over my lifetime. I was born in 1971, and diversification when I was born was having some hogs, maybe having a farm feedlot where you did 25 or 50 steers. You had some hay, you had some corn, and that's what you did. Now diversification for us is I've got sheep, I've got corn, an off-farm job. And in your case, you got the off-farm job that supplements the hogs and the cattle and the corn. As you work with your customers or as you interact with other farmers, how important is that diversification as particularly we're going into 2025 where it looks like the crop side is going to be really, really, really tight?
Yeah, it's extremely huge. I mean, I'll be honest, like I said, I started in 2012. This is the first year I've ever sat down with my banker and going in, like as far as planting beans, we're planting beans essentially at a loss, knowing we're going to lose money going into it. And I've never done that before. And it's the strangest feeling in the world. But the nice thing is knowing, like my wife, she's a school teacher. And then I work 3 days a week, off farm. We know we can at least weather the storms of this. We know cattle prices are high right now, but we know that at some point this thing's going to turn and you're going to lose money. And I guess it's just, whether it be some people have a trucking company or working off the farm, to me, it's extremely important anymore because there's so much capital involved. I don't think a lot of people realize how much capital is involved in ag and running a farm. Like I said, we're a small farm. I think it would blow people's minds what our operating note looks like. Whether you're talking cattle or crops.
Yes, and I had the discussion with Dave Orrs, a banker friend of mine, and as an illustration for our non-farm brethren. In 1978, if you went belly up and you embodied the farmer that could not survive the farm crisis, and you went to town, worked at John Deere or wherever, you could carry that loss, that mortgage that you carried over from losing the farm, bankruptcy.
Mm-hmm.
If you and I today said, we're done, sell what we got and whatever's left over, we'd have to be a CEO somewhere to be able to carry the note to pay off in our lifetime what you and I've got setting out just to put in a crop and handle your cattle, right?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking, I mean, like, I guess I'm not afraid to say it. I mean, we're well over $1 million in debt, which I hate to say it, in the egg industry, you look at $1 million, most people say, well, it's a lot of money. And it is a lot of money, but it's a drop in the bucket in the egg industry. I mean, 160 head of feeder calves and 80 acres of farm ground, renting another 400, and then it gets you to that kind of debt.
It's real easy to rack up a lot of zeros. And I don't mean zeros as in losses. I mean zeros on the right-hand side of a number. So the other thing that I think we're in an interesting time is that we talk about record cattle prices. And I know you follow cattle. You go to some auction barns there in northeast Iowa. If I wanted to fill my feedlot with 100 7-weights, what would that cost me per head today?
It costs you roughly call it $2,250 a head right now is what it costs you.
Okay.
Between $2,200 and $2,300. If you're buying top end, it's going to push up $2,300 or maybe even a little more. So
100 head feedlot, I've got $250,000 just in a breathing animal.
Yep.
I haven't done anything to them.
Yep. You haven't put a stitch of feed in it.
Maybe I trucked him. Maybe I trucked him from the sale barn or the farm to my place.
Yep.
If we took those calves to market and we sold them at 14, what would be the value of that steer?
Right now they're bringing.
I guess I could do the math too.
Right now they're bringing roughly. I'm just going to say on the low end, you're going to say $205 a pound at a finished weight.
So you got $3,000 that steer's worth.
Yep. That's
some big numbers, AJ.
It's huge numbers. I mean, it's astronomical, and I know people that feed a heck of a lot more cattle than I do, and I just. You sit there and you think about what it costs them to fill their yards, and you just shake your head and say, how?
So we got $2,250 get that steer in our lot. We get $3,000 when we take it to Tyson. So they got $750 in how many months?
Oh, you probably do it in about 5 months. Again, it's going to depend on the genetics and how they gain and what condition they were coming out of the barns, but by 150 days, we'll get you there.
Okay, so 5 months, so less than half a year. So in that $750 difference between purchase price for that steer and its sale price, how much of that is going to be profit?
With those numbers, if you're figuring opportunity, I mean, it's going to depend on how you want to figure your costs. If you're figuring opportunity costs on stuff, if you're buying, let's just say if you're buying all your feed, it's going to cost you about $1 a pound to get you to that number. So it's going to cost you about $700. So it's going to leave you $50 a head profit.
If you take them to 1,400 pounds from 700, you got $700 in feed.
That'd be feed, yardage, interest cost, all that. It's everything wrapped up into that $1 a pound.
$1 a pound. We fed him for 700 pounds of gain. We got $50 profit. Is that right?
Yep.
Now, I was always taught that you need to do some ROI of 3 to 1 if you're going to do something. So let's do a quick math. I got my handy dandy Casio out here. So 50 divided into 3,000. That's a 1.667% profit margin. That is a lot of work and a lot of risk for a little bit of profit.
Absolutely.
And I think the illustration there, AJ, is that we keep talking about these record cattle prices, but we're not making any more money per head than we were at lower prices. Maybe we're making a lot less money per head than we were before, right? It's just a lot more zeros involved.
the fun part for the feeding part of the industry is the run up in prices. When you're buying these calves and selling them, for me, buying a 4 to 5 weight calf and selling them as a 850 pound calf for the same dollars per pound, that's where you're making your money. Once we get to a certain point, it kind of plateaus and you're back to just being a margin feeder. You're just feeding on margin and you kind of have an idea what it is. And everyone wants to know why, people keep getting bigger, farms keep getting bigger. And it doesn't matter if it's a row crop or cattle feeding, it's the same deal. If you can make $50 a head, well, what do I need so I don't have to work in town? What do I need? How many do I need to feed so I don't have to work in town? If I want to make $50,000 a year, well, I'm going to have to feed 1,000 head of them a year.
Using the numbers that we just had. Yes.
Yeah. It's frustrating because, it'd be nice if there was more money in it. But like I said, the run-up's the fun part. It's once it plateaus. Right now, the guys that are making the really good money in the industry are the cow-calf guys, which they deserve it. I mean, they work harder than I do.
It's their time. They're due.
I mean, there's a lot of years where
when you can go to
it made no sense. It made no sense to have cows because you could buy that calf cheaper than they were raising it for.
Oh yeah, well, and we've also had those conversations on the pig side too.
Yeah.
Why would you want to invest in the sow when you could buy a weaned pig for $15 or $20? As we've had our conversation about how challenging it is to make a profit, the magnitude of the input costs, the size of the loans and bills that we're talking about, it seems like we're looking for places where we can find additional profits. And one of the things that you and I see, and I've dabbled in on the sheep side, is direct to consumer. If we can take out that middleman of the packer and the butcher, and we can take our steer from your lot and put it in somebody's freezer or kitchen, there appears to be a lot of profit for us to glean. Is that a fair assessment of how the conversation starts?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, listening to other people talking. My dad raises freezer beef. He's got a market for it up by the cities. But yeah, there's definitely extra money to be made. And I would argue, is it really extra, or is it just you're doing more work than dropping off at a sale barn and you're getting a premium to deal with people?
Well, we haven't got into the nitty gritty. We'll do that, but on the surface, looks easy. That hey, cut out the middleman. I'll sell it straight to Mary Jane in the outside of Waterloo. I'll sell it to her for X. She gets less. She pays less. I get more. It's a beautiful business model.
Yeah. I mean, on the surface, the business model looks fantastic.
Yes. And then you run into the realities, and the reality that I have ran into and that I shared was finding somebody to slaughter a sheep. I couldn't. There's just not enough places in our area to accommodate me. And we had, in addition to that, we had people in our area that didn't want to commit to me because they didn't want to put all their eggs perceived in one basket. Mm-hmm. They'd rather deal with their current clientele. What were the challenges that you've seen with either your customers or your attempts or people in your area, particularly on the beef side, of trying to tackle a direct consumer market?
I think the biggest thing lately has been just hook space and trying to get a spot to be able to get those animals harvested. Kind of since COVID, it's kind of screwed everybody up, and it's pushed a lot of people towards freezer beef, and there's just not enough infrastructure in, I'm just going to say, rural America to be able to handle the amount of cattle coming into small town lockers. It is a huge one. That and you're talking about people committing to you, just the pain of it, the cost, and where if you're going to get paid or not is a huge part of it.
Well, just yesterday at the Fort Wayne Farm Show, I talked to one of the lockers that we use. Was talking about having to schedule some pigs and some sheep for this fall. And she says, "You don't have cattle, do you?" I said, "No, I don't have cattle." I said, "Why?" She goes, "We're 16 to 18 months out So they have spaces filled up.
Yeah, you're putting a date down, and the calf is still 4 months from being born yet. Right?
Yeah.
Hasn't even probably been conceived yet at that point.
You lose control from a beef producer trying to depend upon direct consumer unless you've got a really good relationship with a packer, local locker or whatever. The other problem that you and I have talked about is, what are we going to do with the oxtail? What are we going to do with the tripe? What are we going to do with all those pieces of meat that come off that cow or the pig that the average consumer doesn't want? Because when at the end of the day, most consumers that buy our product want ham, they want steaks, they want hamburger, maybe a tri-tip or a roast, right?
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I worked at a small butcher as part of my background coming out of college. I worked for a small butcher, and I mean, they had an outlet for a lot of that stuff. I mean, for the offal, not so much. That just went to a rendering plant. But as far as like if somebody didn't want the kidney or liver or something like that, there was a mink farm that the guy bought that stuff from them. So they had at least a little bit of an outlet to add a little bit of value to it. But I mean, that's what a lot of people don't realize just on the commercial side, talking about how they want, everyone wants to bash the big four packers. But there's a big part of the value of that animal that the commercial segment of the industry of feeding cattle gets from them shipping or selling that stuff. And guess what? The people that are selling freezer beef are using the number that the packers are paying, for the most part, at least as a base, to price their meat in a local locker setting. But the value is, they're losing out on some of the value of it, I guess.
Well, I'll use the pig market. And I didn't notice this until I was really looking into some numbers that were shared by one of the consulting firms that I worked with, where they were looking at the profitability, we call it the cutout, and then added to it the offal value. And I don't mean AWF, it's OFFAL, and that's the guts and what's in the guts that's left over after you butcher a pig. That was between $5 and $10 a pig. Yeah. And that stuff it isn't turned into fertilizer. It's converted to a food product that gets shipped overseas to somebody that has a different palate than you and I do. But that's $5 to $10 a pig. So $7.50 a pig.
The heart valves that they're using. I mean, that's a lot of people want to do away with animal agriculture. And this is going to jump into another whole nother topic. But how much of this the byproducts of these animals are being used in modern medicine or that people don't even realize?
Oh, diabetes was treated with insulin from pig pancreases for years.
Yep.
But that gets back to value that is added to that commercially harvested animal that we can't glean when we're in a direct consumer market. And you hit on it just a moment ago, that we see the people that are trying to do the direct consumer that still use the commodity market to base their prices. And in reality, their prices need to be based upon their costs, all costs, including the butchering, and a really healthy profit margin. So instead of steer being worth $3,000 to that person that fed it out, maybe that steer's worth $7,500 when you actually get it taken off and put into a freezer.
Yep.
Go to the restaurant in Protivin with that really, really, really nice looking tenderloin that you and I talked about, and tell them you're going to sell a steer for $7,500. What are those guys going to tell you?
They'll tell you to go someplace else. They're not interested at all.
And it's a change in mentality. And I think it's a change in mentality that we're not used to in ag. And I had this discussion this week multiple times in comparing our thought process as farmers with the thought process that my friends have that are in direct to retail businesses, landscaping, irrigation, construction work. Their thought process is not, or 1, 2, 3 equals 6, so it's worth 7. Their thought process is, I got $6 in expenses, I've got $6 worth of experience, and I got $6 worth of profit. So they take $6, turn it into 18, and we take $6 and turn it into 7.
Yep.
And that's the kind of mentality you have to have if you're going to be direct to consumer, right?
Yeah. I mean, I have this, I actually have this conversation a lot with people about, well, where should I price price it at? And I said, the one, with where cattle prices are, they're like, well, I don't know about, I might lose money on these. I said, you're going direct to the consumer. You should never lose money going to direct to the consumer. You know what your animal cost. You know what your feed costs are. You know what it costs to get them butchered. You put your margin on top of it, and that's going to be the price. I mean, you should never lose money going direct to the consumer.
No, because you took the CME and the big boys out of it. So you've got what we always complain about in agriculture. Get the CME out of it. Get your cargo out of it. Let me price it. But then we fail.
And I think a lot of that, I hate to say this, but I think a lot of it has to do with having to deal with the consumer. I don't think people realize when they first start out how much work actually it is. If you're going to truly do it successfully, how much work it truly is, and having to deal with people is not easy.
I am friends with 2 people that are successful in direct to consumer. And in both cases, it happens to be the wife, that is their job.
Yep.
Or part-time job. They don't do it in the evenings. It's during the day. They've got a storefront. It is a job. And they have the personality that can deal with explaining to the housewife why something's so expensive or why they had to get something. And there was an illustration that I shared with you last week that was on a bulletin board that we're members of, where they sold a steer, and the person bought a quarter of a steer. Now, you and I are thinking, why would you buy a quarter of a steer? And that person was complaining because they only got one porterhouse, they only got part of this and part of this, and all of us farmers were like, hey, the math does it. The carcass weighed this much, and you take the bone off, and this percentage, and yeah, you get 99 pounds of retail product. That customer didn't want 99 pounds of retail product. They wanted stuff to eat. That person that sold that quarter did what they said, but they failed what the customer wanted.
No, and that's the hardest part. I mean, I know my dad deals with it every year. Somebody says, well, I didn't get enough. I didn't get all my meat. I mean, there's a lot of education that goes into it, which in turn, a person should be getting paid for if you're going to go that route.
Well, and if you're going to go direct-to-consumer route, you have to get out of the freezer beef mentality, in my opinion.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to say, in your case, I'm going to put 10 in the feedlot, I'm going to feed them out, I've got 25 people that will buy a half or whatever, and you just do it. You've got people you trust, it just supplements your income. That's doable as long as you've got the customer base. And people that understand, if I get a half a steer, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z. But if you're going to do typical direct-to-consumer, to replace a butcher shop or a grocery store, you almost have to be completely USDA inspected or whatever appropriate state inspection is. And you take inventory of everything and you decide what to sell and what not to sell.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you truly want to be successful doing it, I do think, and you want to maximize the dollars you can make on one steer, you need to be selling it by the cut. And that gets into a whole nother deal of, everybody wants steak, nobody wants roast. How do you bridge that gap?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or what about the non-traditional cuts? I'd use oxtail because it's easy. How do you sell that? I mean, there'll be 1 out of 100 that'll be, hey, I remember Grandma made oxtail soup. I'll buy it.
Yeah.
But of those 100, those 99 that won't buy it, are there 50 that might turn that into fresh dog food? Hey, here's new dog food for you. It's made of real beef and it's oxtail.
Yep. Or getting some of the bones back to make, like you just said, like make dog treats out of, or there's a lot of routes you can go.
But what did we just do with that illustration? We went from a farmer to a retailer, and the mentality is completely different, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. 100%.
So we took that shine off of that apple that looked really delicious of direct consumer, of being easy and tasty, and it's not.
No, and then you can just try and get into the marketing aspect of it, and it gets really complicated. Because that's my funnest part of this whole discussion is the way direct to consumer people market their beef or market their meat.
Okay, we'll open this can of worms that I knew we were going to open. You're probably a little more vocal. I think we share the same opinions, but what is your challenge or what chaps your hide when you see direct-to-consumer people advertising their fresh from farm meat?
My biggest issue with it is, I'm not going to say all of them, but 7 out of 10 of them are going to put down the commercial industry to try and prop up how great their stuff is. What was it? Month and a half ago, 2 months ago, they shut down Mexican cattle imports on the border, and the southern part of the United States relies pretty heavily on those cattle coming across to graze wheat. They shut it down because of screwworm. I don't know how many times on TikTok I saw people that are direct consumer bashing this part of it because, their beef's better. It's 100% American. It's grown and raised on our farm, which I've got no problem if you want to go that route, but don't bash everybody else to try and make your product look put a lot more shine on your product. Because at the end of the day, it's the same product. The biggest difference is the processing of that product.
And I've said for years, and I've used it with egg producers and people selling direct-to-consumer meat, is tell your story, but don't lie about your competition.
Right. But it seems like on the direct-consumer side, that's 101 is put them down, talk about how they've got they're antibiotic-free, they don't have implants, all of which is completely safe for the consumer, but they vilify the industry to try and make an extra dollar on their steak.
Well, on the beef side, we hear about it. No antibiotics is across the board. You've got grass-fed as a positive mantra.
Yep.
You've got non-GMO. These are non-GMO fed, and they're not fed corn that's going to rot in their stomach. On the chicken side, on the layer side, it's I feed them a real diet. And, they got space. On the pig side, you can just go to town on the pig side. I'm cage free. I'm crate free. And then anybody that's worked in the farrowing house knows that, oh my gosh, crates have done so much. And I've thrown out to pig people that were criticizing crates and talking about the positives of farrowing on pasture. It's like, so you value the sow more than the pig? Oh, what do you mean? Well, what about that sow that savages that pig and lays on it? You don't care about the pig? Well, that's not what I'm saying. Well, yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, and I was going to make a TikTok on it today. On our local news station, which is an NBC affiliate, had a article on Facebook talking about how red meat is being linked to dementia or something like that. And the farm to fork people or the direct consumer people, they fight the same battles that the commercial industry fights. But when they turn around and they bash the commercial industry, it makes people look at an article like that and say, well, just because it's not just the commercial industry, it's the whole livestock industry. Red meat's contributing to this. I'm not going to do that. Just because they're shedding a negative light on the commercial industry doesn't make them immune to articles like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see some people saying, hey, look, commercial red meat's bad for you. My beef is not because X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And in reality, it's all red meat.
Yeah, I mean, we fight the same battles. I mean, just because you're going farm to fork doesn't make you immune to the PETA people or, the animal activists saying you're doing a terrible job, because they don't care.
Yeah, they're going to come after you regardless because you're raising livestock.
Right.
Just because you have 15 in your feedlot, not 150,000, doesn't mean they still don't want to get rid of you. Well, it's going to continue to be a challenge in our industry as profit margins stay tight. And I know you and I are tired how tight the margins are because we live it, but it's the truth. Whether raising a pig or we're not rolling in money like some people think. But then that brings up the point that as we go forward, livestock people are in a tough position where it's the benefits of government bailouts don't seem to trickle down to people that raise livestock as easily as those direct payments to crop farmers. Do you see that with your customer base?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I don't know. I'm on TikTok and I get to see both sides of it. And you make a video and it's amazing on the row crop side, the amount of people that come after you about subsidies. And the same people come after the livestock people and talk about it, but they don't have a clue. Since I'm in both, we've got one direct payment in the 10 years I've been farming, 12 years I've been farming. We've got one payment on the livestock side. And that was during COVID when everything went to hell.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah. But
and you got so much overhead for livestock. Yep.
Now, I mean, you look at, they just passed that Farm Act. All the row crop guys are going to get a payment because the prices of crops fell, which I can't say I agree with because we all knew it was coming. Am I going to turn it down? No, it's going to help us stay afloat. But my next thing is, will that happen on the livestock side? I highly doubt it. When the market turns, are they gonna float us money because the market turned on us? And I don't see it because it's never happened before on the livestock side.
I think you bring up a good point when we're talking about subsidies and payments. And if you talk to the economists, they're going to say, well, the livestock industry benefits with cheap corn because corn's cheap, their inputs are cheap, and an oversupply of soybean meal is going to relate into cheaper soybean meal. And the economic arguments make sense. But if you look at a practical standpoint from a magnitude of dollars, we can't afford to bail out the livestock industry. And let's just look at pigs. There's 115 105, 110, whatever number you want to use, but there's more than 100 million pigs butchered every year in the United States. $1 a pig's $100 million. And a dollar a pig isn't going to do anything for us. Imagine that Stabenow, before she left, got in front of the Ag Appropriations Committee and said, I want $100 million. Number one, the press is going to eat her alive. $100 million. And then it's pork producers going, hey, you couldn't do anything for me.
Right. And I wonder if the livestock thing, I think it's probably more so because if you look at the livestock industry as a whole, it's a lot more corporate than row crop ag is. Mm-hmm. There's at least on the pig and chicken side. So we know those two are very vertically
dairy
integrated.
In there too.
And dairy, very vertically integrated, more so, and that's where the cattle guys kind of SOL because a lot of the cattle, at least on the cow side, are still extremely independent. Mm-hmm. Feedlots get a little more, you talk about, and I think it'd be easy enough to do where, you got to be below a certain size, but it's still doable on the cattle side. But I think that's probably more why you don't see as much. You don't see it on the livestock side is just because there's so much more corporate involved, and really they're just be bailing out very large companies.
Well, then you imagine using my $100 million example. It's only $1 a pig, but who's going to get the most of that? JBS, and Smithfield, and whatever. We can name off all the big guys. The bulk of them are going to get it. It's still $1. It's still, in that example, $1 a pig, which is nothing. But the stories that the anti-ag and anti-government spending press would do would just lambaste it because it all go to corporate. And just thinking about chickens, is there...
Yeah.
Yes, the organic producer in Minnesota is going to get $200, and Dew and Tyson are going to get millions in that example. So if we can put your consulting hat on and the work that you and I worked with together, as you're sitting down and making plans for 2025, what are some of the opportunities you see in livestock feeding in your neck of the woods, which is how many counties in Northeast Iowa?
About three to four, I guess.
Three?
It would be. Yeah, 3 or 4 counties.
And that'd be how many miles radius around Protivin? 30?
Yeah, 30 to 40, I would say.
So and that would encompass what counties?
Be Howard, Winneshiek, Chickasaw, and what's the other one? Fayette, I think. We got a little bit in Fayette too.
Okay.
But those 3 or those 4 is kind of the main area.
For the audience that doesn't know, you would border Minnesota to the north, right?
To the north, yep.
And then
we're only
how many miles west of the river?
Takes about probably 50, I would say.
Okay.
It takes about an hour to get to the Mississippi River, roughly, give or take.
And then it takes you about
probably about
hour,
50,
45 minutes to get to Waterloo.
About an hour to get to Waterloo.
As an illustration, you're an hour from the river, an hour from Waterloo, and right bordering the Minnesota.
Yeah, we're about 20 miles from the Minnesota border.
Okay. And then from a topography standpoint, the area where your customers work and where you farm is not the typical flat black, everything's in full section fields. You've got a little bit of roll to it. You got some trees.
Yeah, it's hard when people think of Iowa, they think of flat black, nothing but cornfields. And we're up here in the bluffs of northeast Iowa.
You're right on the edge of where the roads no longer are straight.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. I worked in Harmony, Minnesota, which would be, 25. It's just across the border. And there isn't a straight road there. Like you pull up, they try and explain to you where to go. And if you miss a turn, you might be driving 3 or 4 miles because there's not another road to get you back to where you were. Whereas you go west of Protivin and everything's a square. There's a road every mile and it's all square. You miss a turn, you just go to the next mile and come back around. Kind of a deal.
Yep, just a mile detour, go down the road. Yep, you'll be all right.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
try and do that between you and Decorah, and you'll end up in Macokota. You didn't mean to.
Yep, that's exactly it.
So in that interesting part of Iowa, where you're on the edge of large crop country, you're on the edge of the traditional dairy area of Iowa. What are your customers? What are the opportunities for your customers and for you to help them this year?
The biggest thing is just how to make a profit on these cattle with prices where they're at. We've been talking about that a lot because it's just with where these calves are. I mean, it's kind of the same situation as like I talked about soybeans earlier, where you're going into the bank, ask for money on a crop you're going to lose money on. There's a lot of these cattle right now that you can't really protect a profit, whether it's using LRP or hedging them on the board, because the cash market's so strong. The board's trading on fat cattle right now. The board's trading in the upper 190s, 197, 198, but in the barns they're bringing 205 to 215, and the feeder cattle prices are more reflecting the cash prices than they are where the board's at. So those are kind of the conversations we've been having as far as especially on the feedlot side, of guys buying calves, is how are we going to make money on these cattle with where their prices, where the prices are.
And we're getting back to what we talked about in your operation. We're worrying about making profit, but we're burning through a lot of money to get to that point.
Yeah. It used to be like, wouldn't even think twice. Like I borrow money to put cattle in. That's the only money I borrowed. And it was pretty much, I was selling my cattle back through the sale barn. It would basically I figured one calf would pay the sale barn commission and one calf would pay my interest. All of a sudden now it's taken 2 to 2.5 calves to pay that interest. And that's a hard pill to swallow.
So what are some of the tools or mechanisms or schemes that you're using with your customers to help them get through this tight profit time?
The biggest thing right now is just making sure that you're getting these cattle, getting the right cattle bought for the money you're spending. I could think of one customer they will sit in a sale barn all day and buy 1s, 2s, and 3s and put together quite a few head of cattle at below what a big group would cost you. And they're going to, very rarely do they lose money. I mean, I'll be flat out honest, because if you don't value their time of sitting in the sale barns all day long. But I think there's more of that can be done, versus just going out and buying, you get a potload of 7-weight steers come in that look really good. Well, you've got big feedlots that are looking at them because they can fill a pen with one semi-load. And I hate to say it, but their costs are cheaper for the most part too, because they're buying their products on a semi versus guys getting us at the feed mill to bring out 2 ton of feed. Instead, they're getting 25 ton, and they're getting a pretty good discount because they're getting it direct from the manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. They buy it by the truckload instead of by the pallet or by the bag. Well, and that gets back to, there's been a big discussion on opportunity cost on TikTok and how people view that. And obviously, one of those opportunity costs is that guy sitting there all day in the sale barn compared to what else he could do with his time.
Yep.
I mean, it works for him. And it's funny you bring that up. I remember at one of the jobs I had in high school, the man named Mr. Hardy, he would tell me that in his younger days, he would go up to Shipshewana in northern Indiana to the sale barn, and they'd bring in groups of feeder pigs, so 35, 50-pound pigs.
Yep.
And there were equations that these old farmers had in their head that you multiply the price of corn times this, and then that would tell you how much you could pay for a 40-pound feeder pig. And it was quick. Boom, 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 boom. They'd bring in a group of 50 of them, and everybody knew what they could pay for those pigs based on price of corn. And maybe that guy that's buying those 1 and 2 head lot has that in his brain. Like, okay, I know my corn costs, my silage costs, my whatever, and he can do that.
Yep.
Sometimes the further we get away from some of those lessons we learn, we have to pay for that by buying larger groups or whatever. But it's interesting you bring up that. But he's found a way that he could set his own little niche and make some profit at it.
Yeah, and they do a really good job. Now, I mean, they're not selling because of the way they buy. They're not able to put a semi-load of fat cattle together and ship them direct to a Tyson or JBS or a Lime Springs beef because they're just too up and down. But they've also built a pretty good relationship with the Tyson fat cattle buyer in the sale barn, and they are usually pretty close to the top of the market come time to sell when they take them back to the barn.
That's a testament of a good cattleman that can take 1s and 2s and turn it into a consistent group of fats, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So at the Fort Wayne Farm Show this week, I interviewed 15 different friends of mine about what they thought was the biggest challenge for ag in 2025. And I would say 50% of them, maybe 75%, said cost. Know your costs. Don't spend money on frivolous things. As you think about your typical customer, what percentage know what their costs are?
I'll be honest, probably maybe 40% of them, I would say. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. Some of the bigger guys don't. I'm a numbers person through and through. Like, I'll sit down.
I had no idea.
Done, kids go to bed. Kids go right. Kids go to bed at night. Wife goes and watches her show. I usually pull up my computer and I start playing around with numbers, seeing what we can do. What's going to make us more money. I got a large, or not a large, but they got 300 head of cattle in their feedlot, And I asked him one day, I said, what's your cost of gain on them? And he looked at me like, what are you talking? What the hell is cost of gain? Like he's like, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He goes, well, we bought them for what, basically they're buying them through the sale barn and they contract them to dress beef in Wisconsin. So we bought them for basically the same price we're contracting for. So we have to be making money on those, which he's not wrong, but it's completely different than how I need to know every cost, what every group costs me, what it's costing me every day to run my mixer, type of a deal. And I've got a lot of customers that do. If you asked them what they made on a pen of steers, they wouldn't know. They know what it cost them and they know what they sold them for, but they don't know what their feed costs are.
Well, I think your 40% is probably high for our industry as a whole.
I was gonna say closer to 25% to tell you the honest to goodness truth. Because I don't even think it's 40.
It was 25 when you started selling. Now it's 40% because you've helped them through the line.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly it. Yep. And I will say, I think it does help because like that 300 feed yard I was talking about, like he'll message me on Facebook and be like, what are these steers? What do you think cost of gain's doing? So all of a sudden now he's starting to have a little more of that thought like I do, because if I know my cost of gain, I can walk into any sale barn and buy a set of calves and know that when I walk out of there, whether or not I'm going to make money on them, or at least have the potential to make money on them. Well, they still got to perform, but
so
at
that's
least
because you're a numbers
at least
guy,
I know.
you're a numbers geek, right?
Yeah, right.
So you're able to take that experience and help your customers and get some confidence that they can send you a Facebook message asking if they'd make money, right?
Yep.
That's a side benefit of people working with you through Farmer's Elevator, right?
I would say it definitely is.
2025 is going to be a profit challenge. It doesn't matter if you're feeding pigs or steers or trying to grow a crop of corn or soybeans. The know your costs is without a doubt what we need to do, and people in technical and supporting roles like you and I have, that puts us in a position where we can offer added value to our customers because we either know them from our own operations or we sit down and look at numbers that we get from our customers.
The one nice thing about, I look at it because I'm selling and mainly my customers are beef customers because, as you know, pig customers are few and far between. They've got either 10 pigs or they've got a 7,000 head sow unit. There's not much in between there. But the nice thing I look at for me doing feeding cattle is a lot of the products that like Kent rolls out, I'm going to take them home and I'm going to try them before I ever promote them. And because I want to make sure that there's the benefit they claim, I'm not just going to take them at their word. I want to make sure that they're working and that there is a benefit or a return on what it costs before I go out there and push a product. And I think in my business, I think me feeding cattle brings a little more validity when I pull into somebody's driveway to talk to them about, about that stuff.
It brings an added level of credibility for you. Because you can not only say, here's product, here's the features of it, here's the benefits, and oh, by the way, when I fed it, I got X.
Yep.
That's one of those experiences that you're able to share that I think we've lost in our industry just because our industry's changed. 40, 50 years ago, I think there were a lot more people that had skin in the game.
I would agree.
How we can capitalize on that sets us apart. So one of the little things that I didn't think about until we started talking, AJ, is when I would come to Profitability, I would always leave, for the most part, to the west. I didn't start out that way. It came after I discovered a gem that was to the west of Profitability. And what might that be? That little gem be that's west of Profitability?
West of Profitability.
I'm putting him on the spot. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. Oh, he
Jericho?
does, but let's see if he figured out. Pardon me?
Jericho? Just trying to think. Where's the
Norman Borlaug's home place.
Oh, yeah. 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 Duh. I it's hard for me because I don't, because like Norman Borlaug, I guess I associate him with Cresco because it's kind of just like, he's considered to grow up in rural Cresco. But yes, he is just west of Protivin is his home farm, where his boyhood home or whatever.
And I would assume that it's also, you guys as a local, it's just, okay, yeah, it's over there. It's just part of the area. Whereas to me, oh, wow, I got to drive by Norman Borlaug's home place. And in the times that I would come during the day, I would park, and I never did the full tour, but you get out and be able to walk around and put your feet where his feet were. And it's no different than me going to my grandparents' farm and put my feet where my grandfather fed cattle in the 1930s and 40s. So it's a little gem that I appreciated being able to see when I visited Protivin.
It's definitely something that we take for granted, I would say, most around here, because it's, we've got in the fall, we've got the Norman Borlaug Harvest Festival in town, and his name is all over everything. There's 2 or 3 statues around it of him in town. It's just, we're just inundated with Norman Borlaug all the time around here that you don't really appreciate what you have, like somebody that's coming in from out of the area.
Yeah. And I just happened upon it one day. I think it was, I had to go to the bathroom.
Oh, sure.
And I turned north on this road, and then I, go hide in the corner and then drive. And it was one of those drive north because I know I'd be able to drive west. And I was like, oh, what's this sign?
Yeah. Yep. No, it's, like I said, we're pretty fortunate. And like I said, he's all over, and we're a big wrestling community too. We got the Iowa Wrestling Hall of Fame in town, and he was a good wrestler too. So
I forgot about that. How did I forget about wrestling in Iowa?
Yep.
And that is funny. You've got Norman Borlaug's home place. You've got the Iowa Wrestling Hall of Fame, and you don't have a restaurant that's open on a regular basis.
It is. We had one. We actually had one. Moved from Decorah to Cresco, and like the week before it was going to open, they had a fire and basically burnt the inside of it. So that took them like 2 more years to get it open. They opened for, I don't know, 3 months, and then abruptly shut down. Said, we can't find help. We can't, we're not getting enough people in the door. They shut down. Every time I was in there, it was busy. I was only in there twice, but it was packed every time I was in there. But it's kind of one of them deals, just like, and I know there's some people in the community that are not happy, because it's more or less seemed like he just kind of was open to get his insurance money and then shut it all down again.
Oh, yeah.
Because
the politics and the joys of living in a small town.
Yeah, I know staffing's an issue everywhere, but every time there's plenty of people in there whenever I went in there. So, but
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we've covered quite a bit of ground, and we hit on exactly what I thought we'd hit on the freezer beef, and your insight into profitability is one I think is invaluable for your customers because you're a numbers guy. And I'm glad you're there to help your customers and share that knowledge. And as we close out every one of our podcasts, I end with 5 questions. And you've listened to them, so you've got the benefit of at least having an idea what they are. My first couple guests did. It was fun watching them squirm.
Yep.
So we'll end our conversation today with those 5 questions. The first one is, what is one lesson that agriculture has taught you that you carry with you every day?
Relationships are invaluable. Whether that's neighbors or customers or that and reputation you can't put a price on it, because at some point you're going to need help from somebody. I don't care who you are. And that's the one thing, whether it be through my job or living in a small community, the relationships you build are invaluable.
That's a really good one. Yes. And it seems like ag is set apart from a relationship, because I've got a group of friends that Kim and I have, and it hit me recently that every single one of them has some sort of ag background, and I think that makes our relationship stronger. And they're different than the relationships I have with non-farmers.
Well, and now, like, I guess what really made me think of that is the pending TikTok ban, because I haven't been on there for a year yet. I think it's really started in May, but them talking about shutting that platform down, and you realize the relationships you've built with people. I mean, I got a lot of them. I've got their phone numbers. We talk all the time, but it's still one of them deals that there's people on there that you talk to pretty much every day that you're going to lose that. I mean, it sounds weird being it's a social media platform, but you build relationships with them people, and it's hard to watch it disappear, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you and I sat down 2 years ago and you said that TikTok and ag would be important, I think we both would laugh ourselves out of the chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So the second question, AJ, is if you could spend an afternoon with any ag figure from history, who would it be and why?
Oh, I guess I can't really put a name on one, but anybody that's run a big feed yard. That, I mean, to me, the amount of knowledge a guy can pick at their brain, because in a large feedlot setting, you're going to see everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of somebody in that vein would be just the opportunity to pick their brain. I would really enjoy.
That's an interesting one. What is one obscure or quirky thing about ag you think more people should know?
Oh boy. We're a lot more business minded than people realize. I mean, it's not quirky, but I think the general public still has that idea of the guy with the pitchfork and overalls, and it's not even close to that anymore. I mean, there's still guys that wear overalls, obviously, but we're a lot more of business people than people realize.
I think that's a great example, and think back to our discussion of that steer that we'll get $3,000 for.
Yep. As you can tell,
a yard full of we're talking big numbers that non-ag people can't relate to.
Yeah, I mean, and as you can tell, you can tell by my answers, I'm kind of a numbers person, because all my answers have kind of revolved around the same thing, haven't they?
Well, think about what you just shared previously about what you owe the bank. It's $1 million, okay?
Yep.
If you take the average person, their house, their cars, their clothing, their hobby stuff, and their 401k, they still won't get close to that million. They won't hit that $1 million.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's a great one that the general public doesn't understand, that we're business minded. And I think there's a lot of us that share things on Facebook and other places on our social media, not to brag, but to open our friends' eyes that yes, this is a business and it's a lot of money that we're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. A great example of this is when I first kind of started doing TikToks and talking, a lot of my videos revolve around, most of them revolve around cattle, but risk mitigation and numbers and stuff like that. Go figure. But my aunt, who is a city kid growing up, she lives in St. Paul, Minnesota right now. She got on my channel and she goes, you opened my eyes up so wide to what is actually going on and how much capital is being put out there to do what you do. You know, you sit down and talk with any of my aunts or uncles, and their heads about explode when they say, you're 36 and you're $1 million in debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a great example. That is, and I think that we in ag should capitalize on that more. And the nice thing about what you're sharing, you're not sharing anything that is controversial. You're just sharing, hey, here's what it cost me. This is the truth about raising cattle. And you don't have to have NCGA or NCBA or National Pork Producers edit what you're saying. You're not trying to say, well, match some sort of social media push that somebody's telling you. You're just saying, here's what it cost me to farm. And I think that's a great way that we could share our story. So 2 more questions. So number 4 is, what is your favorite agricultural tool, product, or innovation, and why? And if you don't say calculator or Excel, I'll be disappointed.
I actually would say performance beef. The cattle feeding software I use. I rely on that. I'm on that not only just to feed cattle every day, but I'm on there looking at intakes and daily gains and break evens every single day. And it's expensive, but especially for a young guy, it's set up for a larger feed lot, but for a smaller lot, it's expensive. But I think the dollars that you get out of it, or the value you get out of it, is so worth it. And I'd have a hard time feeding cattle without it anymore, to tell you the truth. Because I built a closeout sheet, some closeout sheets, and it's nothing like what they've got.
Well, I think that when you're talking about yourself as a smaller farmer and myself in that same scope, and I talked with one of my advisors at the Fort Wayne Farm Show yesterday, that because of our size and our limited number of units, whether it's bushel or calves or lambs, the push to have profit or make good marketing decisions on each one of those units seems to be higher for us than it does for larger, because we have a fewer number of them.
Yep. And in the same breath, I'll say harvest profit on the row crop side. I use harvest profit, and that.
Okay. So could you explain to the audience what those 2 tools are? Because I know what they are because I've seen them.
Yep.
But can you talk about how they work and how you use them?
So, like on the performance beef side, it tracks everything. Like, it's connected to the scale on my mixer. So every pound of feed I dump in my mixer gets recorded. It records as I'm dumping the feed out into the bunk. It's recording that. I can put in if I treat calves, if I basically anything I do to them cattle, move them around, I can track it.
And that's an app-based program that's on your phone?
Yes, it's an app-based program on my phone. And then every day, if you want to, you can go in there and you can look at it. It gives you real-time, let's see, like as-fed and dry matter, what you fed on an as-fed dry matter basis. You can pull up a report. It'll give you a real-time. It's insanely good at tracking weights. So like it'll tell you what them calves are weighing that day, or what it thinks they're weighing that day by the stuff you put in when you first bought them. I've sold three groups of calves while using performance beef, and it has been within 20 pounds of my sale weight, which to me is absolutely insane that I can get that close just by the numbers that get put into it. So it allows you to track profitability. It spits you out a real time break even, with what the calves are cost and what you've got for feed in them, what they weigh. Here's where your break even is. Now on the harvest profit side, it's extremely similar, just more you can track. You're able to track all your inputs on the row crop side, and you can see essentially real time profitability again. And to me, that's a huge thing. You pull it up, it gives you kind of where where your expected bushels are, where the price is, and it'll give you a profit loss on corn, on beans. I'm sure it does on wheat. We don't grow any wheat, but on wheat. And every day that number changes because it's tied right into the CME board, and it fluctuates up and down. It kind of gives you a good idea of when you should pull the trigger, I guess. You figure out what you want for margin. If that day you see that number, pick up the phone and call and sell some grain. So
sometimes we need that outside push to either make us do a sale or make us confident that when we did do the sale that it was okay.
Yeah. Yep. And like I said, when you see that number real time, it gives you, I guess, for me, it gives me I feel a lot better about pulling the trigger when I know, okay, this, at these prices, I'm going to make $100 an acre. I'm going to pull the trigger and sell some bushels. Versus now it's showing negative on some of them and it makes it hard to pull the trigger on sometimes too.
Great. So the last question, what is one small act or change you think could make the biggest difference in agriculture's future?
I think, and this is going to sound really weird, but how we treat each other in ag. Ag is cutthroat, and it's not as bad on like the livestock side as the row crop side, but man, it just seems like everybody's after another acre, and they're willing to do whatever or pay whatever it takes to get it and get it out from underneath the person that has it now. You've heard the stories of people. I mean, it's sad when you go on a social media, you got to keep certain things pretty private or even your location private, because you don't want the neighbors seeing it and going after what if you've got something in the works. Let's say you're buying a chunk of land or trying to rent a chunk of land, and you essentially got to keep your location private because you got to worry about the neighbor up the road. And to me, I think we could do a lot better job. Just being a little bit more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, thoughtful of everybody else.
That's a really good one. And it seems like, I thought about this last year, that we always celebrate when ag comes together. Well, poor AJ Friedges, he died at 37. And wasn't it great that these 20 farmers from the Profitability area came and harvested his crop so his wife didn't have to worry about it? Okay? Yeah, Great story. AJ's combine burns down. Oh, I got to finish my 80. And, I'm sorry, I already pressure washed the combine. I can't come help you. Virtually the same thing happened, just your combine broke, you didn't die. And our response is completely different.
Yep.
Well, AJ, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. And we're both getting ready to prepare for the polar vortex, bedding down some ewes, and at least me, and getting some ewes in the barn to get ready for lamb. And I'm sure you're going to put down some extra cornstalk bales for those calves. But thank you for taking time and to chat with us. And I'm sure that this will not be the first time or the last time we spend time together.
Well, it sounds great to me. Anytime you want.
And to my audience, thank you for spending time with AJ and I as we talk about some of the interesting and expected things in agriculture. And I hope you gleaned a few unique nuggets about AJ's life and how he raises livestock and his view on profitability to get a little more of an insight into what makes ag special. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Patio Pondering. We hope you enjoyed exploring both the expected and obscure corners of agriculture with us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. We'd love to hear your thoughts and suggestions. Connect with us anytime at jim@patiopondering.com. Until next time, keep growing, exploring, and cultivating.